Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're doing something really ambitious. We are fundamentally shifting how we think about suicide prevention, moving it from this unsolvable, completely reactive crisis into a manageable, proactive challenge. We're going to talk about how to stop waiting for terminal outcomes and focus entirely on early, actionable intervention.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll cover the tyranny of time, how we're measuring psychology, validating the signal, breaking down the trace methodology, and wrapping up with what the winning team will actually do.
All right, let's jump right into part one, the tyranny of time. 720,000. That is the staggering number of lives lost to suicide globally every single year. We're talking about one life lost every 40 seconds. And you know what's crazy? Despite those numbers, our core prevention systems haven't fundamentally changed in about 150 years.
So what this creates is what we call the tyranny of time. Right now, the burden of action falls almost entirely on the distressed individual. Because early signals get totally erased or ignored, we end up locking the whole healthcare system into this reactive, crisis-stage intervention mode. And by that point, the window to actually help someone, it's incredibly narrow.
Think about cardiovascular health for a second. We don't just wait around for someone to have a massive heart attack to intervene, right? No, we proactively track leading indicators, things like blood pressure and cholesterol. But in mental health, we're currently relying on lagging indicators, like hospital visits or crisis line calls. To outrun this tyranny of time, we've got to shift our focus and start tracing those proactive leading indicators instead.
Which brings us perfectly to part two, measuring psychocale.
So what is our leading indicator? We need to measure psychache, and yes, it's pronounced psychic. This comes from Schneidman's theory, and it basically describes an unbearable, intolerable psychological pain. You see, the individual isn't usually seeking death as some abstract goal. They are seeking an end to pain that just feels completely inescapable. Tracking the trajectory of this subjective, deeply personal experience is our absolute best upstream lever.
Okay, moving to part three, validating the signal. Now, how do we know we're measuring this accurately? We validate it using a framework called Gauge R&R, which stands for repeatability and reproducibility. Think of it like this. You wouldn't weigh a delicate carton of eggs on a giant truck scale, right? It's just the wrong tool. It's not sensitive enough. We need highly sensitive, validated instruments to make sure our measurement system actually deserves our trust before we even try to interpret the data.
So, how do we locate this signal out in the real world? We essentially split our data collection into two categories. First, we have listening posts. These capture the signals actively transmitted by people, think conversations, self-reports, or digital check-ins. Then we have observation posts, which observe the broader context like healthcare utilization or socioeconomic indicators. When you combine them, they create this really high-fidelity, comprehensive picture.
Let's look at how we act on this in part four, the trace methodology.
Trace is this continuous five-step loop. First is trend, where we establish a baseline context. Then recognition, where we actually notice a meaningful change from that baseline. Next is awareness, which is about understanding that signal in its proper context. Then we have connection, which is a thoughtful, genuinely human reach out. And finally, engagement, where we sustain that momentum. The ultimate goal here? To make people feel seen before the next hard moment has to speak for them.
Now, I want to be super clear on this. Trace is absolutely not about slapping an automated risk label on someone, and it is definitely not about more surveillance. A meaningful signal isn't a verdict, it's an invitation. It's an invitation for a human being to notice, to ask, and to show up with care. It's about making our ordinary, day-to-day engagement visible. And that brings us to our final section.
The winning team will.
This is what the Race to Life X Prize is all about. The vision here is massive, literally a game changer. The goal is to permanently shift the global mental health system away from that reactive crisis management we talked about and move it entirely into predictive, preventative, and scalable care.
To make this concrete, X Prize uses these winning team will statements. For the general public, the mandate is incredibly clear and powerful. The winning team will be the very first to save 1,000 lives and successfully prevent relapse within a 6-month period.
But behind the scenes, for the experts and investors, the criteria are incredibly rigorous. They have to save those 1,000 lives within a specific population of 8 to 10 million people in a single year, and they have to reduce those 6-month post-discharge relapse rates at the lowest net societal cost. That last part is huge, because it proves that proactive intervention isn't just morally right, it's economically viable too. So I want to leave you with this.
We so often treat hope as this fragile, purely inspirational concept. But what if we completely changed the paradigm? Imagine an infrastructure where we don't just hope for a world free of suicide, but we actually measure it, we invest in it, and we hold ourselves completely accountable to achieving it. That is the exact future we build when we finally outrun the tyranny of time.